In this video, I'll show you how to make a simple sprite map in Inkscape. What this involves is creating a series of images which are slightly different and then cycle through each one of them to create an animation. By using the PNG format and opacity on some of the layers, you can create areas of shading as well as incorporate the ambient color of any of your backgrounds which you may be using. Start by creating a rectangle or square. This is the most important part of the process as it will determine whether or not your animations are calculated correctly later on. Remember to deselect it, reselect it, and apply the width and height as needed. In this case, I'll be using 250 by 250 pixels for my width and height. It doesn't matter where you place this on your screen. The only part which does matter is that the content you are using fits nicely inside. When animating, each layer represents a frame in your animation. Ideally, you will be working with content that you can directly manipulate, in this case an SVG graphic, or you can use a reference image and place it underneath your cube or rectangle. In this case, I'm going to duplicate the object I'm going to be manipulating and make a few minor adjustments, in this case scaling the size of the bud. By shift-control dragging, you maintain the origin of the original object and maintain a consistent appearance. I could also adjust the gradient at this point for a variation in, say, a lighting condition where the ambience is changing over time. Duplicating the current layer again and adding a stroke. Pay attention to which layer this is being applied. In this case, it's being applied to the top layer. You may have to move it directly if it is being placed somewhere else. Again, a minor change to the gradient before moving on to making another frame. I'll make a few more adjustments before moving on to the next step, which will be creating the actual sprite map. Now, I've already prepared a final example of this where I have fine-tuned the petals, the gradients, and compared it better to the layers which are above and below particular areas. But say, for example, you are done with creating the frames for your animations and you're now ready to save it into a sprite map format. What you would do is make sure that all the layers are visible. Because I only used the box to define an area which I want my sprite to be visible in, I could select the box, select same, and select the same object type. Now when I apply a stroke and fill to none, it will leave any transparencies intact for the composition I've created. The next step is to group each layer into one object. For that, select the layer, press Ctrl-A to choose all the individual components, and Ctrl-G to group them together. Repeat this by selecting the individual layers and pressing Ctrl A and Ctrl G. Until all the layers are done. You can see it is now seeing this as one object per layer, and this will make it easy in the next step to align them. Dragging a bounding box using the selector tool around all the content, selecting Object Arrange, and making sure that the columns match the number of particular layers that I'm working with. In this case, it would be 6. You can see that it has changed from 2 rows to 1. Making sure that the spacing is set to 0, selecting Arrange. At this point, you can zoom out, go to Document Properties, and resize the page to fit this particular content. Now this is showing the layers from the top to the bottom. If you want to show the layers in the order from bottom to top, you can group these. Flip them horizontally, ungroup, and then flipping them back horizontally the other way. Pressing H would have done the same thing after I selected the object. You can now export this as a sprite map. Selecting Export, your page. For this particular sprite map, each unit is 250 by 250 pixels. Times 6 will be 1500 pixels for the width. You can see the height automatically adjusted to be 250 pixels, meaning it has correctly taken the proportions of the original bounding box I defined. All that's left to do is export it. Making sure you have the correct location. I have my fine-tuned image here, which I have already tested in the animator and made a few minor adjustments. But you can see already some of the powerful features Inkscape has when you want to create some basic sprite map animations.